You hear it all the time. Africa is behind, offline, excluded. The reality is we're not offline, we're overexposed. Our data, our lives, our governments, our habits, they are all online, but not here. Not stored in our countries, under our laws, on our terms. They live in someone else's cloud, on someone else's servers, governed by someone else's idea of value. I am Zainab Taongachira, and this is Not Just Observers, an AI governance series brought to you by strangersX about power, governance, and the political economy of AI from an African perspective. Now, I want you to imagine something with me. It's 2025, you're sitting in Lusaka, Johannesburg, or Lagos, scrolling through your phone. The apps you're using, the algorithms serving you content, the AI systems processing your data, they are all powered by African resources and African labor. But here's the thing, almost none of the value from that system flows back to Africa. Sound familiar? It should. I'm calling this podcast Not Just Observers because that's exactly what we've been told we are in every major global governance platform. I'm here to tell you that that should change, and this podcast is about how. Let me set the context. I'll start with where I come from. I'm Zambian. My country holds 6% of the world's copper reserves. We are a key player in cobalt and nickel production. As I speak to you, those minerals are being extracted from our soil, transported through corridors like Tazara that links landlocked Zambia and its copper to the Indian Ocean in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, or to the Durban port in South Africa, and shipped across oceans to power data centers in Virginia, semiconductor fabs in Taiwan, and electric vehicle batteries in Germany. These minerals are the backbone of what we call the AI revolution. But here's what's not being said loudly enough. Africa isn't just a bystander. We are not just consumers or even users or just users. We are the foundation. But foundation doesn't mean we have to be passive. There's a term that's been making rounds in academic circles, techno-feudalism. It was coined by former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis, and it describes how digital capitalism has mutated into something that looks less like competitive markets and more like medieval feudalism, with lords extracting rent from digital fiefs. Yeah, it sounds intense, but stick with me. It has a lot to do with how we live, work, and connect online, especially here in Africa. So what is it? What is techno-feudalism? The idea is we are no longer living fully under capitalism as we know it. Instead, we're entering something new, or rather something old with a tech twist. Varoufakis refers to this as cloud capital. Now, imagine the feudal system from medieval times where lords owned all the land and peasants had to work it, giving part of their produce to the lords in exchange for protection. So what is this cloud capital? It doesn't literally live up in the clouds. It is down here on Earth with us, consisting of networked machines, server farms, cell towers, software AI-driven algorithms, and even on our ocean floors through kilometers of optic fiber cables. Now, capital existed before capitalism. For example, a fishing rod was invented to catch fish, right? Or a tractor was invented not as a means of transportation, but in order to produce corn or wheat, meaning we had capital as a produced means of production. However, what we now have on our phones, our laptops, and iPads are what Varoufakis refers to as cloud capital. Instead of the traditional means of production, as illustrated in the examples I just shared, cloud capital is a produced means of something entirely different. It is that of behavioral modification. Cloud capital does not produce anything. It is machines manufactured to modify human behavior. It is a machine we train to train us, to train it, to determine what we want. Once we want it, the same machine sells it to us, directly bypassing markets. We see this when your algorithm knows your habits and interests so well that your Spotify or recommended playlists are spot on. Or your FYP on Instagram speaks to exactly what you're craving. That's what Amazon's Alexa, Google Assistant, or Apple Siri is. It is a produced means of behavioral modification. Secondly, we sustain this enormous behavioral modification machine with our free voluntary labor. How does this happen? When we post reviews, rate products, upload videos, photos, we help reproduce cloud capital without getting a penny for our labor, meaning we have become its cloud serfs. I'm sure you've heard or used the phrase, I've built this algorithm brick by brick. We are unwaged laborers who at best don't own our production, but simply pay rent through subscription to the platforms, cue your Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Spotify subscription. Now replace that land with digital platforms such as Google, Amazon, Meta, or TikTok. These tech giants own the digital land we all use every day. And we, the users, are kind of like digital peasants. We post, we scroll, we share, we create content, and in doing that, we generate data. That data, it's gold, and it's harvested by the platforms, monetized, and used to fuel their growth and power. In Africa, this dynamic is even more extreme. We rely heavily on platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, and Google, not just for socializing, but for running businesses, getting news, and organizing community life. But most of these platforms are foreign owned. That means the wealth created from African digital activity flows out and not in. And what about local tech startups? They are often locked out, unable to compete with these global giants. And when your economy is based more on renting tools than owning the systems, that's when you start seeing the signs of digital feudalism. So, what can we do? First, awareness is power. Understanding that our digital labor has value is the first step. Supporting African tech innovators, pushing for stronger data protection laws, and promoting digital literacy, these are all ways to push back. Because the goal isn't to reject technology, it's to reclaim it, to make sure our communities aren't just digital consumers, but digital creators and owners too. That's techno-feudalism in a nutshell. Power shifting from markets and money to platforms and data. And the fight to rebalance it starts with knowing what's really going on behind the screen. We are not just witnessing the emergence of techno-feudalism, we are living it. Copper kings and the dual extraction. There are two forms of extraction happening simultaneously on the continent. The first is physical, through our minerals that flow outward, whether it's through the Lobito corridor, through Tazara, or even through the Durban port and many other ports across the continent. Our minerals flow outward while value capture and technological control remain concentrated with what I call cloud capital lords. The second is digital. Our data, a product of our labor, interactions, and identities, becoming raw material extracted by global platforms to train AI systems that may not serve our needs. This isn't accidental. This is the logical conclusion of patterns that have been playing out for centuries. The only difference is that now, instead of just extracting gold and diamonds, they're also extracting our digital selves. But here's what's different about this moment. For the first time in history, we have the tools to do something about it. We have the technology, we have the talent, and increasingly, we have the political will. The question is whether we'll use them. Let me be clear about what's at stake here. This isn't just about getting a bigger slice of the AI pie. This is about sovereignty. This is about self-determination, whether African nations will have the agency to shape their own technological futures, or whether we'll be locked into algorithmic dependencies that undermine our economy, that undermine our policy autonomy, stifle our innovation, and perpetuate our economic subordination. Look at what's happening right now. The United States and China are in a new Cold War, and Africa is the crucial swing continent. The American playbook emphasizes infrastructure diplomacy through initiatives like the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment, whilst the Chinese playbook centers on low-cost, high-control digital ecosystems through the Digital Silk Road and the Belt and Road Initiative. Both of these approaches treat Africa as a resource to be leveraged rather than a partner to be respected. And both of them assume that African nations will simply choose between these extractive models. But what if we didn't have to choose? What if there was a third path? I refer to the third path as the emergence of agency. That's exactly what's starting to happen. Kenya has released its national AI strategy for 2025-2030, setting out a government-led vision for ethical, inclusive AI adoption. In Ghana, companies like Aya Data are training large language models with culturally relevant datasets. And on a continental level, the African Union endorsed its continental AI strategy in July 2024. These aren't just policy documents. They are declarations of intent. They are saying we will not be passive observers in the AI revolution. We will be active participants who define our own terms of engagement. Cross-continental initiatives like Masakane and Niger Voices are creating high-quality multilingual datasets for African languages. Mozilla Common Voice is democratizing speech recognition for African linguistic diversity. These projects represent more than technological innovation. They embody a fundamental shift from passive resource provision to active technological agency. A message to civil servants, government officials, citizens, policymakers, and academics working in the space. We have done enough analysis of how Africa remains sidelined while the EU crafts its AI Act, while the US and UK host AI safety summits without meaningful African input, and while the G7 establishes AI principles that ignore our continent's priorities. We have documented the problem extensively. Now we must move from critique to construction. With 1.4 billion people, the world's youngest population, and rapidly growing digital ecosystems, Africa and Africans, we possess the intellectual capital and moral authority to build governance frameworks that the world needs. Not just frameworks that respond to Western concerns about frontier models, but our continent's unique challenges. from healthcare delivery to financial inclusion through mobile technology, are precisely where AI governance innovation must happen. It is time for African servants to draft policies that leapfrog existing approaches, for our researchers to publish governance models that other continents will want to adopt, and for institutions to implement regulatory sandboxes that demonstrate how AI can serve development priorities. We must stop waiting for invitations to global conversations and start hosting them. The challenge of this century for African governance practitioners demands that we move from the comfortable space of academic problematization to the harder work of institutional innovation and successful implementation. Africa's AI governance leadership starts with us taking action in our ministries, our universities, and our regional bodies today, not tomorrow. Over the next episodes in this series, we're going to explore this shift in detail. We're going to examine how African nations are asserting data sovereignty, building continental infrastructure, leveraging collective bargaining power, and transforming surveillance systems into civic technology. We're going to look at success stories and failures. We're going to interview the people making these changes happen, from government officials to tech entrepreneurs, from civil society activists to academic researchers. We're going to ask hard questions about power, resources, and the future of governance in the digital age. But most importantly, we're going to center African agency in these conversations. We're going to refuse a narrative that positions Africa as a victim of technological change or a passive recipient of external innovation. Instead, we're going to explore how African nations are becoming active shapers of their technological destinies. In our next episode, we're going to dive deep into what I call the new scramble, how critical minerals like copper, cobalt, and lithium have become the new oil, and how African nations are navigating the geopolitical implications of sitting on the resources that power the AI revolution. We'll explore the real impact of mineral extraction on local communities, examine the infrastructure projects that are reshaping the continent, and ask whether there's such a thing as ethical extraction in the age of AI. Before we go, let me say this. The answer lies not in choosing between competing external powers, but in building capacity to define our own terms of engagement. That's what this series is about. That is what Not Just Observers means. I'm Zainab Taongachira, and this has been the first episode of Not Just Observers. You can find the essay that inspired this series on my Substack and in the link below, where I dive deeper into the concepts we've touched on today. If something stirred your thinking, made you uncomfortable, or gave you hope, share this with a friend or colleague, comment, reply. If you are building something courageous, reach out. You can follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Spotify, YouTube, and Substack to listen to our podcast. And if you're building something courageous, reach out. We want to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and stay in community. Remember, governance is about building community, and we are not just observers.